On behalf of the Water Policy Center, COVID-19 Dialogue, Sectoral Impacts, Global Responses, and Enhancing Resilience to Future Pandemics, it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, chair, and participants who have joined this session. To chair this session, we have Dr. Uma Purushottaman with us today. It is my great pleasure to introduce the chair. Dr. Uma Purushottaman is Assistant Professor at the Department of International Relations and Politics in Central University of Kerala. She was earlier a research fellow at the Observer Research Foundation in New Delhi. An alumnus of JNU, she has worked with the United Services Institution of India, that is USI, and SAGE publications. Her areas of interest include US foreign and domestic policies, great power politics, human security, food security, foreign aid, and soft power. Without extending further, let me request Dr. Uma Purushottaman to take the charge of the session.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that very sweet introduction. And thank you, WPC, and particularly my friend Rao Sao Babaskar for inviting me for this very important conference. I'm sorry I got delayed because there's some issue with the link that I'd received. Anyway, so today we have a variety of topics. I think this is one of the last sessions. So we have a variety of topics from teacher preparation programs to the global pharma industry to world trade and energy security. And we have speakers from all over the world, from Belize to Russia. So without further ado, may I call upon Joyanne D. Bar, who's an educational consultant at and lecturer at the University of Belize. He will be speaking on reimagining teacher preparation programs in the time of COVID-19. It's something which should be of great interest for us because COVID has really overturned education as we know it. Over to you, sir.
I hope that you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Great.
yes.
I will turn my video off once I start presenting. Let me just get, just because it's in the middle of the night here. And so I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. So my name is Joy Ann Difubab, was introduced. Thank you very much, WPC, for inviting me to speak. I am, as I sit here, realizing that probably from one of the smaller countries in the presentation. And so it's diverse from India, the second largest country, to Belize, which is probably 100 and something, with only 300,000, just under 400,000 people. And I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, so I can think of that Caribbean perspective and what the disease has, how it has impacted the Caribbean region. So I again thank you for the opportunity. So I'm going to turn my video off now. So the name of my talk is Reimagining Teacher Preparation, and I take it I have about 15 minutes, Madam Chair. I have 15 minutes. You didn't give me a time, Madam Chair. Aruna, how much time do I have?
Oh, you have 12 to 15 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, 10. I'll take 10. I'll see if I could do it in 10. Okay, so I'll tell you how I got to this paper. At the end of the last semester, I have students out in the field doing practicum. And at the end of the last semester, so we're talking March, 50% of my students had to withdraw from the course because they had not completed the requirement of going into the field to do their field teaching experience. A few, when we reduced the requirement of the number of visits, managed to finish. And then a big chunk of them also took an incomplete in the hope that things would have gone back to normal in August and that they would have gone back to face-to-face teaching. But that didn't happen, of course. So this prompted me, and this talk is really a personal reflection. It's me stopping and thinking about what we were doing in our teacher education program and how COVID-19 could really make us stop and reimagine teacher education that will deal with the realities that COVID-19 has presented us. And in so doing, as I began to read and research, and so much has already been published on the impact of COVID-19 on education, and more particularly on teacher education, it really prompted me to think about us making a change in teacher education programs going forward. And I would love to, in the question and answer session, get some feedback on what I present. I have a quick map here to tell you that I'm way across the Atlantic, far away from India. Belize is the only English-speaking country in Central America, in case you didn't know. And of course, it is part of the Caribbean community, or CARICOM. And it's a small country in terms of population, under 400,000 people. So that's probably a school district in India. And it covers 8,860 miles, which by Caribbean standards, especially the English-speaking islands, it's about twice the size of Jamaica and 4 times the size of Trinidad. So I just put that to give you a sense of size in relation to population and physical size, but to let you know that the impact of COVID is great, because in Belize, more than 41% of the country is below the poverty line, and that was before COVID. And for a country that relies heavily on tourism, you know that we have really not had much income in the last few months. We hope to open the borders back in October, but that's left to be seen. I work at the University of Belize, which is one of 3 universities in the country. The other 2, one is a private university and one is a regional university, and it's only 20 years old. So it's a small organization. We have under 5,000 students, but still, the COVID pandemic affected us greatly. It affected us when schools closed, when the minister announced that we were going to reopen using distance education at the primary level and online education at the secondary. All the things that were discussed yesterday, access to the technology, inequities, budget cuts, shortages, all of those things happened since March. And this unexpected global health crisis challenge education systems, yes, globally, but more so in small Caribbean countries and more so in Belize. But as I said, my focus is on pre-service teacher practicum preparation, because this new normal for teachers puts, first of all, either online or distance. We are using different kinds of delivery tools. We are forced to understand online pedagogy. We are forced to teach in homes, as the last speaker was just saying, at kitchen tables, on porches and backyards, everywhere except in the classroom. We have to have parents as our allies to deliver the content, and many parents simply don't understand what they have to do, as well as we have to create pedagogical strategies that are both synchronous and asynchronous. And so all of this confusion is quite overwhelming for students as well as teachers, and more so for those who are caught up in that space of wanting to become teachers. And so, when we think about it, I look at this and I think of my class chart, because in a class chart, I may have a seating chart, but this really now breaks down my entire class, or primary school teachers class, or secondary, to a modality where some students have fully online access, but some people are fully offline. Yesterday in the presentation, somebody talked about the teachers having to write on the walls because they have to find some way. So there's this great diversity that needs to happen. And in reality, the teachers who are in the classrooms are totally unprepared. And I'm talking about in Belize. Many of the teachers are unprepared. The UN is also telling us that many of the teachers are unprepared because they had been tasked with doing something that they were not trained to do for the most part, which is implement distant learning modalities without very little guidance and with very little guidance and very little training and even fewer resources. And I suppose this is very similar to what is happening in India. So the teachers were not trained, and this is research coming out out of Nigeria, that the teachers are not trained to think about teaching and learning as an interactive process. And now under COVID-19, when we are socially distant, we realize that technology for a lot of people, whether it's the technology on the telephone, on a cell phone, technology, computer, some kind of information communication technology is what you're going to have to use to reach many of your students. This statement really is the one I think that tipped me into stopping and thinking about what I was doing as a teacher educator, because here we were, without any preparation, really saying, okay, schools will go online. And so it's quite difficult because the same cooperating teachers who we depend on in a pre-service system, because we pair our teachers, our pre-service teachers or students with a person who is actually at a school. But those cooperating teachers were themselves being forced to, have this steep learning curve. And so they themselves were not professionally prepared for this new classroom. And so how could we really even depend on them to help us prepare our students? So it made me begin to question what we had planned to do, because clearly if the people who were in the classrooms as teachers were unprepared, how much less prepared were our students, because they simply did not have the exposure to the technological programs that they needed to deliver in the way that it was expected of them. So that really, as I said, it's a personal reflexive paper asking the question, how can teacher education programs be reimagined and redesigned in ways that integrate technology and address teaching and learning in the time of COVID-19 and beyond? And I just want to say, when we think technology, immediately we think, yes, ICT. But I want to think of technology a bit broader, advanced technology, but also basic technology. How do teachers learn how to replace themselves as the main form of teaching in that face-to-face environment? How can we help the teachers to convert what they know in terms of their pedagogical knowledge and their content knowledge and bring that together to design, let's say, a distance ed program for a parent, to let that parent help the child at home? So it's clear, as the UN has said, that we definitely need teacher education reform going forward. And while some schools and districts and countries are already there, that is not the case in Belize. And that's why I saw and took that to heart, that it's clear that we need to reform the training, that we need to make sure that our graduates go out with this technological, pedagogical knowledge that is needed, so that they can be resilient. I mean, everybody is saying, okay, this has happened and something else will happen. In the Caribbean, we are faced with hurricanes every single year. And so there's some kind of disruption to our education system anyway. So we need to make our teachers more resilient. So I got to this technical pedagogical content knowledge TPAC framework. And I don't know if many people have seen it, but it really helped to put things into perspective for me in terms of what was missing in our program, that we really needed to strengthen our technological knowledge. And that strengthening isn't just from, teach them the ICT tools, which they already do. We needed to really strengthen how they translate that technological knowledge into technological, what they call technological pedagogical knowledge. That is how to choose the appropriate tool. And this is work Joanne and Cole and Mishra's work way back. I mean, in the ICT world, they were doing this work 2009, 2016. It's all built on Schulman's idea of pedagogical content knowledge. And they've added back, I'm just going back, they've added the technological component. So I found that a useful framework for me to understand what was missing and how we could go forward with it. So these are my suggestions for what we do. We need to make sure, of course, that going forward post-COVID-19, I don't think we're going to leave the virtual sphere behind. I think that we've all embraced the virtual sphere, and it's certainly easier to have a meeting like this, although I would have enjoyed flying to India. That really is something that we know will be with us, and that we need to embrace this digital competence. But as Kalu, who was a colleague of mine, says, this online teaching and learning cannot be an add-on as it has been, as something by the way. We really have to bring in the technological knowledge and the technological content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge to ensure that our students they know the tools, they know how to use the tools, they know how to use the tools to create content, and they use it in their classrooms. And so in so doing, they can address all of these students. So that's the first challenge that we need to do. The second thing is that, again, future world, we're going to have to continue to support in that virtual world. I spoke yesterday about the individualization, and I was reminded that in some places, they're very large classes, but in our context, our numbers are still small. And so I would support the individualization of the experience for each pre-service teacher. So for example, I have some interns this semester who are out for the entire semester in schools when they open, but we are having one-on-one virtual meetings even before they begin. I think that there should be a change from that clinical supervisory model. I don't know what happens in India, but here, the pre-conference, we watch them teach, and then the post-conference. I think we really need to move to a model that's far more scaffolded and, mirroring traditional feedback loops. This is a crisis, as everybody has said. So it's important, the last speaker spoke about it, that we provide that social and emotional support, because our teachers and our pre-service teachers are dealing with personal trauma, student trauma. They are students, they're also students. So they're learning to teach and being a student and being online, and this need for self-care becomes really very important. So the programs that we go forward with need to be less rigid and be very mindful of the financial challenges that they have within homes. I mean, we have many stories, because for many of those families, they've had absolutely no income, especially those in tourism. And the other big thing, if we go back to the model, is the contextual. And this is where everybody's context differs. I talked about the cooperating teachers who are also learning to teach in the new normal. How do we change what cooperating teachers will do with our pre-service teachers? How do we help our teachers to live in a world of uncertainty? Schools were supposed to open at the end of August, and then 2 days before they were told they were not opening. How do we deal with that in this ongoing environment and still continue to teach and maintain the quality of education that we expect? This is a very centralized system. The Ministry of Education sort of makes the rules. And so sometimes the Ministry of Education decided in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, that schools will be closed and so on. So we have to be very mindful. In fact, we are waiting to get the directions from the ministry to see how we are going to assess our students who are on final practice. So even though we're at the university, some of the programs we have been, we are doing them on behalf of the Ministry of Education. And then the final contextual thing is that education is happening in homes. And we just heard from the last speaker, those homes could also be homes of abuse and poverty and all the things that make it difficult to learn and are useful when students leave home and go to school. So those are the contextual challenges. So this is, as I said, my reflexive piece. This is what I came up with to get my incomplete group to finish this semester. That we're going to build in a distance practicum, that we're going to build in an e-portfolio and e-mentoring so that they have the experience of engaging in that technological, pedagogical knowledge growth, so that next semester, if they can go in as interns, they would certainly be able to do so with a little bit more confidence. So COVID-19 has provided me as a teacher educator an opportunity to pause, to reflect, to rethink, to re-examine my practice as a teacher educator. And so I would like to thank the Water Policy Center for giving me the opportunity to just share this. I look forward to the questions. I am anxious to hear what is happening in your part of the world. And so thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very comprehensive presentation. We'll come back to you at the end of the session with some questions. So I'll move on to the second speaker today. Our second speaker is from my favorite country in the world after India. He's from Russia. Professor Leonid Morgunov is head of the Department of Political Governance at the St. Petersburg State University. He's a visiting scholar at several universities in Europe, the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and he's also a member of the International Political Science Association and several academic bodies in Russia and abroad. He'll be speaking today on the COVID-19 challenge and I think Russia's response to it. I think he's going to look at the public sector response to COVID-19. Over to you, Professor.
Hello all, thank you so much for the invitation for this interesting conference. Salute for all participants. My presentation will be devoted to the problem of political science mostly and politics, COVID-19 and public governability, institutions and strategies fighting pandemic. So I will try. So, excuse me, please.
We can see your screen, sir.
Yeah, okay, but I have no possibility to put forward my presentation, but I don't know why. So, sorry, I did not see some.
I think if you put a slideshow, maybe it will work.
Yes, okay, but sorry. Sorry, I would like to stop my presentation and now will again.
Okay. Is there any problem, sir?
Yes, I have some problems with the demonstration of this presentation. I don't know why. So, okay, this is maybe, I don't know why. Okay. The first question is, how can we name the situation with the coronavirus now. This is war or public policy as usual. At this slide, you see two pictures. One picture, this is pictures of May this year, when where countries try to answer on the pandemic very strongly, and you see that many countries use very strong measures for fighting coronavirus. The situation of September is changed, and you see another color for the countries, and some countries open life in the countries. So, but now we have some processes to removing of the danger of COVID-19 for the countries. And so the question is, war or public policy as usual? And if we answer on this question, we could find the problem of answering on our measures with fighting COVID-19. So we have some answers on this question, and at this side you see extraordinary situation in Switzerland in March of 1990 at extraordinary meeting of the Federal Council took the decision to introduce more stringent measures to protect the public. It has declared that extraordinary situation now exists in Switzerland in terms of the Epidemic Act. And the Federal Council tried to use military forces for the fight in coronavirus. And this was the largest military mobilization in Switzerland since the Second World War. This is one situation. Second situation, this is situation in Israel. Now the health ministry reported about 7,000 new coronavirus cases, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, declared that he, of course, support the right to protest of the population against coronavirus policy, but he fight for the lives of Israelis and for the public's health. And he told, we are at war, wake up, wake up. So the situation is very strange and very worried about the coronavirus in Israel. War, not crisis, not emergency situation. Next point is situation in Sweden government. They told that this is crisis, and this is crisis will continue for a long time. It will be touched, this crisis, but we need to have responsibility. Every person need to have responsibility and together overcome this crisis, says Prime Minister Stefan Löfven in April 2020. And if we compare the results of the Sweden experience in fighting COVID-19, we could say that the situation is not so bad, like some persons, some politicians try to evaluate the situation in Sweden. What the policy here? What the answer of Sweden government on the coronavirus in comparison with another countries? So we have different challenges for public governability, and I would like to stress some of them, but this is not full list of the challenges, but for me this is most important in context of public governability. So the first, the coronavirus pandemic is new, and new in both in terms of the behavior of the virus, its consequences for human health and public health, global transmission, routes, impact on human relations and on the society in general. And for governability, this new situation creates some more complex uncertainty and predictability problems when we say about dynamics of a pandemic. So we need find the new approach to governability in this complex, uncertain, and predictable situation. Second point is, and we need maybe philosophically to think about distance. The coronavirus forced the destruction of direct relations between people and introduced distance both in everyday life and in different fields of our life, in education, production, economy, trade, consumption, and so on and so on. And I would like to stress that distance has as quite as existential meaning that characterize modern contemporary society. So I think this distance, like a new mode of relations between people, violated the primordial human rights to travel. And this is problem for government. This is a problem of governing distance relations and distance entities. And this problem came to the fore. Next three position is, yes, the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the right to life, but I would like to say that more important question for the understanding of coronavirus pandemic situation, this is fear of death, and this fear of losing life has returned humanity to the edge of the Hobbesian transition from the natural to the social state. But when we try to compare contemporary situation and Hobbesian situation, so we could make some differentiation. And general, this is instead of the laws of reason and the order of rational association, the fear of death put forward an order of construction, not society, not community, but mass and conflicts. So the problem for governability, this is integration of the state, of the government, and the people. And this is the question for contemporary government and the civil associations. Next problem is, mostly, last year we understand governability like capacity of government to realize sustainability, accountability, and adaptability. And this is problem where was discussed at the World Economic Forums in Davos many times, and at the G20 in Argentina in 2018. But now the anti-coronavirus response by the government challenge these problems, sustainability, accountability, and adaptability, like the base for governability. Following economic growth and poor adaptability to a fluid environment made governments susceptible to divided society, conflicts, and excessive demands. There is some sociological surveys about how the citizens evaluate society now, and many person, about in some countries more than 50%, said that we now live in divided society, and we have the conflict situation in many countries, and this is demonstration of new situation. And last position. This position is concerning to the construction of power in the country. In connection with the divided society in a number of states, breaks and oppositions of various levels and branches of power have arisen. This is especially obvious for relation between different levels of government, different parts of government, between presidents and governments, between parliaments and governments, between opposition and presidents, between different levels, central government and region, local level of governments. And sometimes president did not agree with the action of the government. Regional authorities pursued their policies often in opposition to central decision. So we have some bricks and oppositions of various levels and branches of government. How government respond to the new challenges of governability? Of course, there are many questions about these responses, but I would like to divide this question into two parts. Firstly, this is government have made a number of changes in the governance practices influenced by the fight against coronavirus, and this is very interesting questions, and we need to study this situation. Governments have responded differently to pandemic, adopting two opposing strategies to combat the virus. This is governing the causes and governing the effects. So I would like shortly explain the differentiation and some position in that questions. So a number of changes in governance practices. I would like to stress some of them. Usually, when we have a crisis, the government response was to centralize power. And we have this situation with greater centralization process and control. And this control was introduced in some countries. And Italy, current government, for example, this is a good evidence for this centralization. But this centralization tendency was accompanied by criticism from the opposition and very strong tension between parties in Italy. But another tendencies, this is decentralization. Which was introduced by various reasons, sometimes political, sometimes economic, sometimes psychological. This is Russia, France, USA, and this is using the principle of subsidiarity mostly. What does it mean, this principle? To solve problem at the level of power at which they arise. Next position is enhancing the role of ministries of health, creating appropriate infrastructure and new institutions, different council centers, and so on. Next, it's very important, This is maintain governability, and governments have begun to develop public service for all with a focus on the poor and underprivileged parts of the population. A number of financial measures and assistance, regulation of taxes, subsidies, payments, and etc. And like result of this preliminary situation, the pace of digitalization of public service, interaction with citizens, and changing some government activities, interoperability, seamless government, big data, smart cities, and so on and so on. And very important question, the role of trustful, legitimate, and credible political leadership in the country. We have the increasing of this situation. In this regard, the personalization of making difficult and unpopular decisions in the fight against coronavirus has often occurred. And I stress some examples. I think Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and our President Vladimir Putin, and Mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin. This is example of this trustful, legitimate, and credible political leadership. And the last position is. Yes, I finish. Yes, okay. So massive international cooperation of national government. Sorry?
Sir, 1 second, we'll check and remove that person.
Okay.
I don't know, someone has walked in. We'll remove the person, sir. Please
Yeah, please continue, sir.
Yes, massive international cooperation, and this is very important factor and changes, because really we have global crisis, we have global pandemic, and we need to reconstruct the cooperative relations between governments, and we need put forward activities of the different international organizations like World Health Organization, United Nations Commissions, monetary funds, different regional organizations like, for example, Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and so on and so on. And this is very important factor for reconstruction of the governability inside inside different countries. And the second position, two opposing strategies to combat the virus, governing the causes and governing the effects. We have more than 150 countries and territories which now reporting confirmed cases of COVID-19 and using some measures to stop its spread. But different countries take different strategies for fighting coronavirus. So most countries and governments have adopted a strategy that can be roughly referred to as the governance of causes. And this is limitation of the causes of the diseases. This is limitation to the spreading COVID-19 and so on. This is lockdown, masks, movement restrictions, online work and education, economics, vaccine development, hospitals, and so on and so on. And we could find many differentiations in the using these limitations in the countries. So in some countries we have more strong position, in now the not, and so on and so on. But very interesting question. This is a minority of government, like Sweden and Belarus. And some of the political forces in the countries, in the different countries, for example, in Italy, try to use this second strategy. This is governance of effects. And the choice of this strategy was due to various reasons. Sweden, this is constitution. This is a relation between central government and the regional governments, between central government and population. For Belarus or Belarus, this is economic rationality. This is some problems with economic development, but it's interesting, the general governance strategy here were not limitations, although they were at these countries, but the result of the formation of public immunity based on the study of experience of the development, the diseases in the country and other countries. And I think we need be more attentive for the study of this new political strategy. And like result of my presentation, war or public anti-pandemic policy as usual. We return to the original question, what is the fight against coronavirus? What does it mean? I think why this question now is important for me. September showed a number of worrying trends regarding COVID-19. In some countries and regions, diseases are on the rise again. In Russia also, in Moscow especially. So I am worried, but it is possible in the near future we will have a war on the coronavirus as a policy as usual. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. That was a really insightful presentation into how governments across the world have responded. Some of them have decentralized, some of them have responded by centralizing power. So some of them, of course, have curbed down on dissent, for instance. I'll come back to you with some questions after the session. So I'm going to move on to the third speaker. The third speaker is Neeta Sanghi. She's a supply chain consultant, pharmaceuticals, and senior research fellow at the Water Policy Center. And she's someone who's had over 20 years experience in the pharma business. And she's going to be speaking on can the global pharmaceutical industry utilize the COVID-19 challenge to regain the trust of its customers? As we all know, big pharma has always been, in recent times at least, been depicted as these really, bad guys. And people don't even want to go in for clinical trials anymore. So maybe this is an opportunity for the pharma industry to kind of get back the confidence of customers. Over to you, Dr. Sanghi.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right, all right. So good day to everyone. And thank you to the Water Policy Center for giving me this opportunity to present my thoughts on the pharmaceutical industry. The virus which has struck the world this year is actually not the first of the epidemics in this century. We've already had SARS, MERS, Ebola, Zika. All these strange sounding terms have been there with us since the beginning of 2000. Some of them caused alarm and scared people because of their severe symptoms and because of high mortality rates. Now, the present coronavirus is similar to the SARS virus, but it's milder. The mortality rate is much lower. These are the two positives. And the huge negative is that the symptoms take a long time to exhibit themselves. So as much as about 2 weeks, and there are many, many asymptomatic people. That is the main reason that this COVID-19 has spread across the world far, far more than the earlier epidemics. Now, in these circumstances, the promise of an early, safe, effective, affordable and universally accessible vaccine which can prevent people from getting infected has come to be widely viewed as the only possible solution to end this pandemic. Now, I've used a lot of adjectives here, and each one of them is critical, and I'll come to each one of them in time. Now, the pharmaceutical industry does have the expertise and the wherewithal to fulfill this need given enough time and resources. Unfortunately, as Dr. Uma also mentioned, over the last few decades, it has earned the reputation for being patient unfriendly and profit friendly. So we will just take a perspective of, given the past and current actions of the industry and the current geopolitical situation, what are the odds on our getting a vaccine quickly, and therefore the pharma industry, how will it come out of this situation? Now, to take a little bit of a background on why the pharma industry does not have a good reputation today. Research in new drugs was until recently the domain of the big pharma, a few companies based in United States and Europe. As corporate America adopted Nobel Prize winning economist Milton Friedman's 1970 philosophy, which states that the social responsibility of the business is to increase its profits, Big Pharma followed suit and aligned their business practices to meet the expectations of the share markets instead of patients and physicians. In the last century, in the last decade of the 19th century, the profits of the industry came under extreme pressure due to cost considerations, as a number of patents expired on its blockbuster drugs, generics provided stiff competition, and then the industry moved to change its business practices in multiple ways such that its profits would get saved, would get protected. So patent evergreening, pay for delay, pricing of new drugs based on value to patient and not cost, reliance on public funds for development, spending less on research and more on sales and marketing, efforts to increase market size by expanding disease definitions, by lowering disease thresholds, and ghostwriting of academic articles. Now, this long list, which is quite unflattering to the industry, but it has been, documented, and it has resulted in a lot of public and regulatory anger against the companies. Most governments and regulators responded by, putting controls on prices, except in the US, where free markets still decide the price of drugs. Most countries have some form of price control on medicines. All kinds of financial transactions between doctors and drug industries have to be either declared or, many such transactions are a crime by law. All such, the data of clinical trials has to be made public. Many such efforts were taken up, although the results of them have not been completely satisfactory. On the price front, I think this is one place where the Indian pharmaceutical industry has played a stellar role in making number of new medicines, especially related to AIDS and cancer, accessible and affordable to many poor people across many countries. Indian industry is the third largest by volume, the 10th largest by value. It supplies over 40% of the generic drugs which are used in the US today, 25% of the generic drugs used by in the European Union, and it supplies 62% of vaccines used across the world. So the Indian pharmaceutical industry has helped to save billions of dollars in the developing countries also. Unfortunately and ironically, many Indians cannot afford the medicines manufactured in our own country. Many poor people across the world, including in countries like Brazil and China, also cannot afford all medicines. But of course, it's not the pharmaceutical industry that has to be blamed for that. Poverty, government policies, lack of government spend on public infrastructure are many reasons which contribute to this affordability. Just a word here about international organizations like Doctors Without Borders, WHO, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Gavi, CEPI, who have been working tirelessly with governments, regulators, regional activist networks, and the companies to improve access to the affordable medicines. And they are trying to do the same in this pandemic also. With a short background, let me come quickly to the response of the pharmaceutical industry to the coronavirus pandemic. Every day we have all been reading a number of news items related to new drugs being, identified, repurposing of old drugs, vaccines coming under clinical development, companies coordinating with each other, announcing projects. And all of this has actually resulted already in improvement in perception about the pharmaceutical industry amongst the public in general. A phenomena which has been dubbed as reputational halo by an industry expert. And I will, along with you, try to figure out if this reputational halo of the pharmaceutical industry can be converted into a long-term trust relationship between the public at large and the industry. So in trying to do this, I'll try and answer a few questions. Can a safe and effective vaccine be developed quickly? Will it be accessible and affordable to all the people of the world? Will the scientific community and the researchers also have confidence on the safety and efficacy of these vaccines? Because that's a critical element. How will the industry demonstrate that it is not looking to profiteer from this crisis? Because I think that is one of the accusations against the industry which needs to be debunked. Lastly, how is the geopolitical situation today going to affect the accessibility and the affordability? So let's look at safety and efficacy and finding a vaccine quickly. In the month of March, CEPI, which is a coalition for epidemic preparedness innovations and which was founded in 2017 with the sole purpose of enabling quick vaccine development for pandemics and epidemics of this sort and for making it accessible to people all over the world. They stepped in and they announced a pandemic paradigm, swift development and manufacturing program to cut the time which is required for vaccine development, anything between 5 to 10 months, to something like 12 to 18 months. And all developers have been using that particular paradigm. Now, more than 160 and some accounts say 200 vaccines are under development. More than 30 of them are in clinical trials. There are 9 vaccines which are in phase 3 clinical trials. Out of this, 4 vaccines belonging to China and 1 vaccine belonging to Russia have been approved by those countries without phase 3 trials, and they are being used. Although there is no way for us to say how widely they are being used, but they are being used. The remaining 4 vaccines belong to Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Novavax. Now, how do we ensure that the clinical trials will be done impartially and the evaluation of the safety and and efficacy which is found during those trials will be reliable? Now, the companies have definitely realized that they need to do some confidence building measures so that acceptance of their vaccines will improve. And they have taken a lot of steps. even if it means delays. So we are all aware, we've all read that the AstraZeneca trial was halted because there was one participant who experienced an adverse event during the trial. While the trials in UK, Mexico and India have been resumed, the US FDA has still not given its approval for resuming the trial. They are still reading the data. The other thing that has happened is that on the 8th, there has been intense pressure, political pressure on the companies to come up with a vaccine urgently. In fact, just yesterday, I was hearing that in the United States, the president is saying that he will take the final call on approving the vaccine, which seems to be, impossible because it is FDA which has to take that call. And FDA has said quite clearly that until and unless they are convinced that the safety data and the efficacy data is good, they are not going to approve those vaccines. The companies on their part, there are 8 front-runner companies. They have made a pledge on September 8th that they will not apply for emergency use authorization until the phase 3 results show safety and efficacy data. This pledge has actually resulted in an improved confidence. I was just watching now, there's a Harris poll which has come up saying that people are quite confident with this pledge that they can rely on the safety and efficacy. Another welcome thing which happened was that Moderna and Pfizer, these two companies, they shared the protocols, the clinical trial protocols with the scientific community. Now, generally, these details are shared only after the trial is completed. So these are some welcome signs that the industries has taken in order to give people the confidence that their safe and effective vaccines will be available. In fact, we've recently, in the last month or so, we've had a number of experts, including Dr. Fauci, claim that now it's not a question of if a vaccine is available, but when a vaccine is available. So let's now go very quickly to accessibility and affordability. Now, this again is another aspect where the geopolitical considerations will have their say, and I will address that also to in a limited sense. Now, we all know that this is actually totally unprecedented, that suddenly the entire population of the world is the customer of the pharmaceutical industry. It has never happened in history before. No ailment has rendered the entire population as the consumers of a medicine. So there are large number of doses that we need. We still don't know whether it's going to be a single dose immunity or double doses required. Moderna and Pfizer are both looking at 2 doses given 1 month apart. We also do not know for how long immunity will be granted by taking these vaccines. They will definitely not be like smallpox vaccines where you have 1 shot in childhood and then you are protected against smallpox for your entire life. These vaccines are not going to be like that. So there's going to be a continuous need. And right now there's a need of at least 8 billion doses to be produced. Now, there are a lot of challenges here. While there are capacities of up to about 6 billion according to a WHO report, so there is still a lot of scaling up to be done. And there are different manufacturing technologies here. So the facilities have to be matched to the technology of the vaccine. Technical transfer has to be done, which is a highly complex step. Generally, companies take anything from 4 months to 6 months to transfer a product from manufacturing in one site to the other site. We just don't have that kind of leisure now. Packaging materials, vials and syringes in such large quantities. Storage and distribution are again going to be challenges because cold chain facilities for storing large quantities will have to be built up. Another challenge is that all the messenger RNA vaccines, which are the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, they require not just ordinary freezer temperatures. They require minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like, Antarctic cold temperatures. Now, attaining those kind of temperatures in many poor countries in the last mile is almost impossible as of today. So these two vaccines will most probably be limited to the developed countries, to the rich nations for quite some time, until either they are able to stabilize their formulations at the normal cold temperatures, or the countries develop this kind of facilities. Having said this much about the quantities, let us talk about accessibility and affordability. Now, there has been some amount of discussion about the price range at which these vaccines will be available. And there have been calls for companies to provide the vaccines at zero profit. Some companies like Pfizer has said that it is fanatic and radical to expect companies to not make profit. Pfizer and Moderna have been very clear that they intend to make their profits, while they are doing it a little lower than they would price normally. AstraZeneca, Novavax, these companies have committed to, selling at cost and not for profit. But even with that, if we look at the price range, AstraZeneca has said they make their vaccine available at $3 a dose. Now, for a country like India, which manufactures so many vaccines, none of our vaccines for the local markets cost more than $1 per dose. So this itself appears to be unaffordable. The price range of Pfizer is 20 and Moderna has said something between around 35. So the price is an issue. Now, having said, and one more thing is the rich countries have said that they are going to make, especially US has said that the government will buy the vaccines and then make it available free to its people. In India, that announcement has yet to come. Now, let's talk about accessibility a little bit. So, WHO and CEPI, they came up with a concept which is known as the COVAX facility. This was a facility which required that all the vaccine manufacturers should make an arrangement with COVAX, agree to give them their supplies to COVAX at a minimal cost, at zero profit cost. The rich countries will buy the vaccines from COVAX, and COVAX will then use those funds to supply vaccines to the poor countries at zero cost. Now, while a number of rich countries, excepting USA and China, have entered into agreements with COVAX, and a number of poor countries have obviously signed into COVAX for getting their supplies. The signs are not very good, but of course it's still early times, because most of the rich countries have also entered into separate bilateral agreements with vaccine developers. So, and they have also agreed to get first priority. So the USA, for example, with a population of only 400 million people, already has agreements to buy 800 million doses of the vaccine, with an option to buy another 500 million later on. Now, of course, we should remember that the US has signed in with 6 front-runner vaccine manufacturers.
Ma'am, if I interrupt very briefly, I think we are running a little short of time. So if you could wind up.
All right, all right.
Thank you so much.
So the bottom line on accessibility and affordability is that the best case scenario says maybe 1 billion shots of the vaccine would be available by end of 2021. The developed nations may be able to vaccinate all their people. India may get some quantities because we are going to be manufacturing, but definitely India will not be able to vaccinate all its people. The poor countries will end up relying on either the COVAX facility, which has very little to give them, or on China, which is making huge efforts. Chinese companies have stepped up manufacturing capacities. China is providing $1 billion to Caribbean and Latin American nations for buying up vaccines. China is also conducting clinical trials of phase 3 in many of these countries. So China is looking to up its ante on vaccine supplies, and whatever negative gained because of the earlier quality problems when it tried to supply masks and PPE sets. It is trying to negate that. That's as far as the affordability and accessibility is concerned. Some words here about the pharma companies and their commercial transactions. Now that doesn't seem to be very positive. There are many cases of company insiders making millions of dollars in the US by selling their stocks and making announcements, because the stock market is very upbeat on pharma. Pharma company stocks in the US have risen by multiples, and many companies, and Moderna is one of them, which is a front runner. And there is a long list of, you know, what can be dubbed as improper behavior, if not illegal behavior, which has already been identified and which is there in the press. In order to wind up, I would like to say that three things. One is that it appears that on the safety and efficacy aspect, the companies are doing their bit to inspire confidence amongst the people and the scientific community that their vaccines will be safe, and that is a positive in building trust. But on the commercial aspect, the profiteering part of it, most of them do not want to change that aspect. They have been fighting a lot to protect their profits. Even companies like AstraZeneca and Novavax have said that their sale at not-for-profit is only until the pandemic lasts and only for this particular product. Two more things I would like to say. One is that WHO has come in for a lot of flack from all corners on account of its role in the beginning and with China. But WHO is the and the other international organizations are the ones who are responsible for the state of preparedness of vaccine availability that we find in the world today. And this role they have been playing, it is their last more than decade one of work out of the media glare and out of the public glare, which is, putting the pharmaceutical industry in a position where they can deliver vaccines to us. So we need to appreciate that. I have already touched upon China, though geopolitics is not my issue, but it appears to me that if China's vaccines are proven safe and work, then China would establish itself as a global power. If not superior to the US, then definitely equal to the US. Because while the vaccine nationalism of US and their attempt to corner off all stocks for themselves is, garnering some amount of public anger, China's offer of supplying vaccines to people in the poor countries, if it works, is going to tremendously help them. With that, I would like to end my session and thank you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting perspective, particularly because we don't often get to hear from people who are within the industry. So thank you so much. We'll come back to you with some questions.
Sure.
I'll move on to the fourth speaker. This is Dr. Paul Rosario. He is currently the head of the Department of Political Science at the Sophia College in Mumbai. He's in fact from my alma mater, in fact, from the same center, American Studies in JNU. Though of course he did his PhD from Mumbai. He's received the Ford Foundation Fellowship and he's participated in the prestigious International Visitor Leadership Program of the United States State Department. He'll be speaking today on the impact of COVID-19 on world trade. I think there are a lot of worrying signs already. Lots of people are losing jobs. I think in India itself, I think growth has come down 23% or something. So I think it would be a very important topic that you're looking at today. Over to you, sir.
Okay, ma'am, can I just share the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This topic which I've chosen for presentation is the impact of COVID-19 on world trade, with specific reference to trade and services. And I'm just going to start by making a few comments, and then I will sketchily point by point refer to a few industries, service industries, which trade and which are impacted by the lockdown effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, the originally scheduled moderator for this program, Pramod, had conducted a webinar where Professor Stephen Walt was the guest speaker. And Professor Stephen Walt has written a book called The Hell of Good Intentions, which is about the American foreign policy elite and the decline of US primacy. Now, in that book, Professor Walt states as following the direct impact of COVID-19. And I just like to put this in some form of a background. And he says that COVID-19 would impact the world by making it a less open world, a less free world, and that the United States as a superpower will be most affected drastically by the COVID-19 pandemic. He also clearly advocates that the WTO is ripe for reform and that there are a need for a new set of trade rules. He also forecasts that cyberspace, because we're all right now in cyberspace, will require new norms of conduct. And he makes the point that there would be increasing competition, but the joint gains which are already there because of at least reasonably monitored healthy competition, we can preserve those. Now, I also keenly listened to Professor Mohammed Yunus in his inaugural address when he clearly made this duality, the contradiction of that in capitalism, the primary focus seems to be on self-interest and profit maximization. But he said that probably is not a holistic or comprehensive understanding of capitalism, or at least the original tenets of Adam Smith and other scholars. And so he said that, you must have a kind of a balance between private interest and social interest. And many scholars have pointed out that world relations, especially with China, given the fact that it is right now in center stage for all the wrong reasons, will probably only change at the margins. Okay, so in relation to that, I'm going to make some comments. But before that, just to give you a flavor of the kind of impact COVID-19 has had on global economy and the global trade. This is was stated very recently because I was trying to, of course, in making a presentation of this webinar, look at latest statistics. And as recently as September 15, the Philippines in an ASEAN webinar said that, the spokesperson said that from the demand side, the government consumption had increased. That's the only thing which had increased positively by 22%. But household consumption had fallen by 15%, close to 16%. Investment had fallen 54%. Exports had fallen 37%, and imports had fallen 40%. Okay, and on the supply side, he also pointed out that GDP had fallen for his country by 17%. Agriculture was again sole beneficiary, had increased very minimally by 1.5%. Industry had declined by 23%. Manufacturing had declined by 27%, and services had declined by 16%. Okay. Now, while this is a story of one country, it's very easy if you look at the statistics, and it's a range of statistics given by WTO, UNCTAD, OECD, and our own Ministry of Commerce, etc. The truth is somewhere in between, and the truth is not entirely stated by the statistics, but it's somewhere there. Okay, so I know we've had some great scholarly presentations by a teacher scholar who's a rare species, and Professor Leonid, and the professional from the pharmaceutical industry. But I'm going to make some very humble but provocative references, just to, as a background to the fact that the impact of COVID in terms of the global political scenario could also be significant. Now, of course, I'm thinking like most people are doing now, as a lay person making some claims. Okay. Now, to me, the significant impact of COVID on trade and on global political economy and international relations is that a very discernible power shift is taking place. It's resulting in a power tremor. And while it's not in the range of possibly an earthquake right now, but the rumblings are clear. And so I'm assuming that, of course, riding on the wisdom of giants, many people are predicting that realignments, readjustments, especially toward or away from China or United States, most likely. Okay. Uh, and that there is also going to be a reinforcement and a restoration of old alliances. And we've already seen that the United States and EU and Western countries, Canada, United States, they're all sort of ganging up against China for reasons known to themselves. Maybe there would be a resurgence to the global democratic, liberal, capitalist, free market world aligning itself with other perceived power threats. Uh, Professor Leonid would probably forgive me. There probably would be new alliances between Russia and China, and I do not know who else would join that particular group of alliances. Um, so all of this is likely scenario. So how are they reacting to the COVID pandemic and its effect on the economy is also related to that. Um, so given the fact that I may not be able to adequately end up concluding adequately, so I'll probably state as a conclusion right away, a kind of a conclusion as preface. I'm again quoting another ASEAN expert, Ambassador Barry Dexter, and he says that if countries are not careful, especially the international, the nation states of the world, he says the COVID pandemic effect on the global economy, especially on trade, is running a very high risk of deglobalization. Okay, and therefore there'll be a retreat from multilateralism and regionalism and rising nationalism, as a result of which there's going to be growing protectionism. Okay. Um, so, of course, from his own perspective, he believes there'll be a major turn away from open markets, and so it's going to affect, of course, trade immediately and effectively, and it's going to change the nature of global commerce and global production, etc., which is already taking place as we speak. And then he says, and Professor Nita would probably be able to explain it better, that there's going to be a trend in the diversification of supply chains. Okay, already countries are changing their factory production centers, the processes, and so on and so forth. And of course, he says that we probably will have to consider alternate energy sources and clearly deal with the impact of climate change so that another future pandemic is averted. Okay, so I go on to my paper now, and so I'm skipping several parts of this paper and going on to some key issues. So if you'll bear with me. Um, the points I'm trying to make, and I'm skipping very quickly, is I hope Uma ma'am will forgive me for the speed in which I go through some of the slides, is that I'm assuming that, again, riding on the wisdom of economists and trade experts, that services is very central to the economy, okay? And and I don't have to give you the statistics, which I'm skipping, is that it's roughly 50%. In some countries, especially the advanced developed countries, it's huge, 80%. And even in sub-Saharan Africa, the madam from Belize will please bear with me for using the word even. So even in those countries, it's very significant. It's larger than agriculture and it's larger than industry. And so it's very significant. And the point I'm also trying to make is that services are so critical because they affect everything else. Financial services, health and education services, legal and accountant services affect all forms of other products which are produced. Okay, and so they are significant. So any effect in service production and service trade is going to have a significant impact on the global economy. Even though if you look at some of the facts, I'm just going to skip the commerce, the Ministry of Commerce facts, because I find it almost comical. I did mention it earlier that, you know, the Ministry of Commerce says that we've had a increase, deficit in trade and exports, and a deficit in trade and imports, but somehow we have a, you know, cumulative trade balance. And how they've arrived at that, I'm not going to focus on it, but the figures that they give for services is that cumulatively there's been a significant fall from 2019 to 2020. Okay, and it's a very significant fall. It's going to, you know, just get larger. And so I'm going to focus on this a few points. And so, ma'am, please stop me at any point of time if I exceed the limit. Now, there's one critical feature of trade and services that characteristic feature of trade and services is it's called cross-border mobility. Okay, and you'll find that international trade and investment have always relied on cross-border mobility of individuals, which means persons have to cross borders. Now, a large portion of trade and services can be conducted digitally, and the consumer and the producer can remain where they are. But this is very critical, and I'll try to make my case why it's so critical. Okay? Now, initially, when the countries made several travel restrictions and closures and lockdowns, etc., they were doing it purely for national health security reasons. But the thing is, as Professor Leonid also pointed out, some of the most advanced countries are, you know, in lockdown mode for reasonably longer period of time, and it's going to therefore have significant long-term impacts on trade. And the way the countries are trying to deal with it, of course, is that they're trying to do some kind of bilateral combinations, which they call travel bubbles. Okay.
I hate to interrupt this very interesting presentation, but could you wind up, because apparently we have to stop the whole session by 3:50, and we have one more speaker.
Okay, that's okay. Yes, ma'am. It's very unique that I just almost got into the points. And okay, I'll stop with probably, since a ma'am from okay, just give me 1 minute, and I'll just focus on one sector, and I'll stop with that. Yeah. Okay. Now, you know, tourism and travel is, of course, I've prepared a lot of material on that. I'm going to skip it. It's pretty obvious that civil aviation and all sorts of transport was affected because countries were monitoring and restricting access. Now, another area which is clearly impacted is education services. And, you know, universities and higher education institutions have relied on physical presence of international students. So the service that we as an Indian student gets by studying in the United States is that you have to go there to consume it. And if students stop going there, are not allowed to go there, large significant amounts of the income based on tuition fee and then their research and existence, etc. As a result of which gets affected. Prominent countries like Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, United States, etc. have invested large amounts of money in attracting a large amount of students. The enrollment has fallen by 50 to 75%. Okay. And a very modest estimate says that American Council of Education says it will drop by 25%. So the problem is the unique feature of trade and services and the impact of COVID-19, as and can be generally stated, is, as with all sectors, the response has to be smart. You have to use technology, and it's going to be all those technology-based industries which are really going to be successful. Okay, and obviously it's very clear that we are benefiting a lot from digital technologies, and we're conducting webinars and classes online. So that's going to just boomerang and expand. I'm just quoting a European scholar and going to give end on a positive note, where he says that the following industries will be benefited enormously by the new changed environments and the need to adapt to it. He actually forecast that health-oriented medical technologies and e-commerce and transport and logistics would benefit a lot. Packaging and food processing industries would benefit a lot. Robotics and cybersecurity and gaming and esports would also benefit a lot. Video conferencing and artificial intelligence and augmented reality and virtual reality technologies, immersive technologies would increase. And lastly, because everybody's life needs to be insured, insurance would benefit significantly, as also surveillance related technologies. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a great honor speaking among great scholars. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Since we are running short of time, I'm going to skip quickly over to the last participant. This is Rahul Palaniswamy. He's a doctoral candidate again from JNU. And Rahul will be speaking on energy security and the US's engagement with China. Again, it's an important topic because oil prices are down and these are two of the biggest consumers of energy. So over to you, Rahul. Rahul, you have 10 to 12 minutes since we need to finish early.
I'm going to try to finish it, wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to, my topic is on energy security and how the US has engaged with China in this regard. So, so let me say what is energy security first. So energy security historically means security of an oil supply. So the concept was framed in the 1970s when there was a huge oil crisis because of the Arab embargo which was imposed on the Western countries. So there are a few definitions like one definition given by Daniel Ergin is like the objective of energy security. He states that the objective of energy security is to assess adequate, reliable supplies of energy. Please hold on for a minute.
Are you having problems connecting, Rahul?
Wait, no, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hold on for a minute. Yeah. So few other definitions given by the United Nations is that energy security is a continuous availability of energy in various forms in sufficient quantities. And at affordable prices. So energy, according to IEA, International Energy Agency, the energy security is the uninterrupted availability of energy sources at affordable prices. So there are a lot of definitions, but there is no consensus on like what it really means, because the complete focus of energy security is on the supply side, and there is a less focus on the security of demand. So China's energy insecurity. China's energy demand has crossed its energy production in 1993. Since then, China began to hunt for energy resources around the world. So its approach was to sign bilateral deals with the different countries across the world. What the Western countries felt was that this kind of bilateral deals which China is signing is a threat to their own energy security, because they were too reliant on world energy market. So, but on the other hand, what China believes is it has a strategic distrust on the energy markets, because it believes that it serves the interest mostly of the OECD countries, the wealthy rich countries. So next, so there is a mismatch, like a contradiction between the approaches of the Western countries and the market-based approach of Western countries and the bilateral deals which China is signing around the world. So, so what the US intended was to get China back into the to build the trust of China and the world energy market and to get it back to instead of signing bilateral deals, it wants to make it made its approach to energy security more market oriented. So in this aspect, the US began to engage with China in the energy sphere from since the days of Clinton administration. So the first creation was the Oil and Gas Energy Forum, which was created in 1998. This forum has brought together government and industry leaders from both the countries for to have frank discussions about their need in oil and gas sector. So in the forum, both the leaders from oil industry from both the countries, government and industry experts began to talk about the common goals, including secure, reliable, and economic sources of oil and natural gas, while facilitating investment in the energy industry. So next, under the next administration, the George W. Bush administration in the United States initiated the US-China Energy Policy Dialogue in 2004. So under this platform, both the countries began to discuss about energy efficiency, how to reduce the energy consumption, reforms in power sector, and to develop power technologies in energy sector, etc. So through this dialogue, China was encouraged to establish a strategic oil reserve as a hedge against the future energy disruptions. So another aspect, both the US and China could form a concert against the suppliers to break their efforts to manipulate the energy market to their advantage. Both the countries have to coordinate, also decided to coordinate the release of their stockpiles in the event of a supply shortage. So this Sino-US energy cooperation also became very necessary because of the re-emergence of Russia's energy geopolitics under President Vladimir Putin. So the next signing was a 10-year framework for cooperation and energy environment between the US and China in 2008. The areas of cooperation in under this framework included clean and efficient transportation, clean, efficient, and secure electricity and energy efficiency. So next comes the Obama administration, under whom there was a much of focus on the clean energy side of cooperation with China, which includes a cooperation very extended to areas like clean energy, energy efficiency, and energy diversification. So under the Obama administration, the US-China Clean Energy Research Center, Energy Vehicle Initiatives, Energy Efficiency Action Plan, and so many programs were became operational. So all those above initiatives culminated with the signing of US-China Joint Announcement on Climate Change in 2014. So let's look at the both the US and Chinese engagement in the multilateral fora. So in the midst of zero-sum attitude expressed by the Asian countries like China with regard to energy security, all the countries were brought in inside a multilateral fora in order to ensure that they become secure with their energy supplies, and at the same time they don't disrupt the international oil market. So the initiative, the effort was aimed towards establishing a loosely knit energy security community in the region. So initially, the US preferred to deal with the countries at the bilateral, but gradually it also began to engage in multilateral discussions. One such examples are the 5-country energy ministerial meeting and the US, China, Japan trilateral, and a few others. So the US participation was aimed at ensuring that the global energy market remained open, transparent, efficient, and competitive. Despite the participation in top-down mechanisms, the US was certain that any solution could only be provided by the private sector and not state-driven. So how did China respond to the US overtures? So China has responded positively. So it began to build a reserve oil capacity. So it has also withdrawn the subsidies which are given to domestic consumers and began introducing a market pricing mechanism. China also cooperated with the US and Japan in the clean energy development and development of energy efficient technologies. So it also signed the Energy Charter Treaty in 2015. It's the significant move towards energy sector liberalization. So positive signals from China. So again, China also cooperated with G20 countries to phase out fuel subsidies, enhance transparency in oil and gas market. China's energy development action plan mentions that China should actively participate in and foster a free, open, competitive global energy market with order and efficient supervision. So what IEA feels is that still China needs to do more. According to IEA, still China is considered to be a black swan in the global energy market because of its lack of transparency in its energy policies and energy data. So it has been pressurizing China to do more. In this respect, presence of China in the international energy market, energy agency, is still viewed as a weak link in the global energy governance. So what is need to be done is it is essential that China is brought immediately into the international energy agency. So China continues its old energy security strategy despite the positive signals which I have mentioned earlier. So China still follows its hunt for energy through the new BRI initiative, which was brought out in 2013. So energy is one of the main component of the BRI strategy. So at the same time, there was a shale revolution which was going on since 2006 in the United States, and it provides some scope for US-China energy relations to go forward. So the cooperation has moved beyond clean energy into unconventional energy areas like the shale energy. So the Chinese firms has taken interest in the US energy sector due to the application of innovative unconventional resource extraction techniques that could in time be applied to China's largely untapped shale reserves. While China is energy hungry and a growing country, the real benefit to North American investment is not energy extracted, as I said before, but the technologies and knowledge which could be gained from the US companies once they come and invest in the Chinese energy sector. For the US shale companies which are much in need of capital, the Chinese investments are also a boon. The Chinese investment in oil and gas sector in the US likely to create more jobs and promote GDP growth and in oil-rich states and increase the US shale energy exports. US shale exports to the US, it has been growing on year since 2016, and in 2017 it has grown 670% until the trade war interrupted and the China imposed a 25% tariff on US energy exports. So let's jump to the Trump administration. So Trump administration, once into office, President Trump introduced his America First Energy Plan. The purpose of the plan is to make an American energy self-sufficient and energy dominant at the same time. So American dominant and energy dominant America, President Trump believes that it should be self-reliant, secure nation free from the geopolitical turmoils of other nations that seek to use energy as a economic weapon. So in this regard, like President Trump relied on energy exports to offset the bilateral trade deficit with China. So in this regard, it has President Trump has been pushing the Chinese traders to import more energy. So let's look at the Chinese energy deals to US. And the Chinese energy deals has been increasing before the pandemic struck. It has been increasing before the trade war. It has been increasing. So like the Chinese have promised investments in West Virginia, Alaska, and even they have inked long-term trade deals with the Chenery Energy to supply 1.2 million tons.
Conclude, because we get the gist of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to tell us each of the energy deals. Can you just conclude?
Yeah.
So then, there's a valedictory session after this, and
sure, ma'am.
You need to go for that. I'm really sorry. I mean, it just happens that you're the last speaker.
So the phase one trade deal which was signed in January before the pandemic, like China promised to import nearly $50 billion of in US energy over the next 2 years. So still there. It was reluctant to strike a long-term purchase agreement. So till through June 30th, it has only imported a meager $2.06 billion of energy from the US because of the pandemic and the resultant industrial downturns and economic downturns, which was visible throughout the world. The quick recovery of China, however, has gives some scope for increase in Chinese energy demand. So, in August, the Chinese oil companies began to ramp up U.S. Crude oil imports, despite the fact that their refineries are tuned to process crude from the East Asia and West Asia and Africa. COVID-19 or oil price war in U.S. shale industry. So in the midst of COVID-19, there was an oil price war, and it struck the U.S. shale industry and pulled it into troubled waters. So there is a chance now, like since China has the economy has recovered and it's a good demand for energy on their end. There is a good scope that the Chinese could stay to the promise and import more energy demand from the US, and it could help the president during election year and shift his focus away from China. So to conclude, I would say that the energy would provide a strategic opportunity to improve the relations between the between US and China. So they could, though the COVID-19 provided a temporary disruption to the promising energy relationship, there is more scope for better relations in the future. Since the pandemic struck, China had been oil industry had been increasing its. They opened up for more Western investments, and that is in the times of talk about more decoupling between the US and Chinese economies. There is a good scope that good chance that the energy sector will provide more strengthen the economic ties between the two countries. Moreover, as the world economy rebounds after the pandemic subsides, energy exports to China from the US could offset the burgeoning trade deficit to a limited extent. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. I'm sorry I had to kind of force you to finish your conclusion. And there is a valedictory session right after this, and so the organizers had told me to wind up by 3:50, and I think we are spot on time. And because we do not have enough time for question and answer session, I'm going to use the prerogative of the chair to kind of end this session here. And I think all our speakers did very well today, and they all deserve a round of applause. And they brought out how COVID is affected every part of our lives, whether it is trade, whether it's energy, whether it's education, whether it is industry, whether it is public governance as such. So thank you to every one of you. Thank you to the participants